Just because we're not at home doesn't mean we let go of all our values. I'm prepping a freezer full of homemade meals for when Makai is at his Mamie's house, so even on the go, he's still eating nourishing food made with love and on a budget. In this video, I'm making freezer meals to bring to my mom's house because when Makai stays with his Mamie, I still want him to have real, from-scratch food that supports his little body. We're talking about banana pancakes, sweet potato brownies, fruit roll-ups, garden pesto, and cozy split pea soup. All budget-friendly and packed with goodness, it's one of the ways I keep things simple and intentional as a holistic mom who believes in slow, nourishing food, no matter where we are. So for the first recipe of this video, I am making some homemade pesto with some basil that we grew from seed. I think we started it a couple months back and now we have a plethora and it needed to be used up because we also have a lot of basil upstairs and it's still too early to plant it. Pasta sauces is things I love to make a big batch of and then freeze because I find they defrost very well and then it takes minutes to cook up noodles with it. And I already know my son Makai loves pesto. He will literally eat it by the spoonful without the noodles. So it's a perfect dish to make ahead for my mom's house because I know he will eat it. So I'm just going ahead and picking off all the leaves of the stem. For a recipe for one serving, you want roughly at least 2 cups of basil. And the fun thing about pesto that you might not know is that you can use a lot of other herbs too. I would say basil is my favorite because it gives that like peppery flavor to it. But you could also use cilantro. You could use stinging nettle, you could use spinach, really any kind of green. They all have their unique flavor. I've actually made a kale one too. If you want, I can link all these recipes down below because I made shorts on all of those. But today I'm using basil because like I said, we had a lot. So I just go ahead and rinse that lightly since it is homegrown. And then let it dry. I kind of dry it with a tea towel, but it doesn't have to be completely dry because you are adding other liquids, but I just try to get a little bit of the water out of it, and then I go ahead and grab all my ingredients. So I am making this version vegan by adding nutritional yeast instead of Parmesan, but you can go ahead and substitute that for Parmesan if you want. So I started off by juicing a lemon. And usually, if you've seen in my past videos, we use extract a lot because it is way more affordable. But however, when we were at the grocery store the other day, we saw a whole bag of lemons. I think there was 6 in there for like $2.50. So today I am juicing a fresh lemon, which is always ideal. Fresh ingredients are always better, but I know sometimes they are not affordable for everyone, including us. But a tip that I've actually learned from you guys, which I'm learning so much from the comments down below, but a way to make your lemons go farther is to zest it, and then whatever you don't use in the recipe, just freeze it in a little bottle, and then you can add pinches. So I did that here. I zested the lemon. I'm trying to decide if it makes more sense to zest it and then juice it or juice it then zest it, because either way it makes the other thing harder that you're doing. And then I just added a pinch of that. I don't want to add too much because I know I've done that in the past and it's made things bitter, but just a little bit helps bring out that lemon flavor without having to juice another lemon. And then because I was trying to make a bigger quantity, even though I didn't have necessarily double the basil or didn't use double the lemon, I added 1 cup of walnuts. But if you wanted to save on money, you could do a half, and you can use any nuts. In the past I've used peanuts because those are the cheapest, although the peanuts I find have more of a flavor that stick out or that stand out, but I still don't mind using them. The recipes usually call for pine nuts, but over on this corner, I'm sure none of us can afford pine nuts because they are ridiculously expensive. So I always opt for a cheaper nut that we have. Like I said, peanuts, walnuts, or almonds. If you get them at bulk at Costco, they're really not that expensive. And then also I added my garlic chopped up in my lemon juice. You can add 1, 2, or 3 depending how garlicky you like it. And then when you add it in the lemon juice, the citrus of it helps pull out the flavor of the garlic. Then I also added a little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt, and roughly 1/4 cup of oil. Kai, my partner, is an oil fanatic. He uses it up so fast, I don't even know how. So I used a mixture of avocado oil and olive oil, so you could really use either. And then I added just a dash of the nutritional yeast. I would say probably equivalent to 1/4 of a cup. and I added a splash of water because this does come out very thick. And usually what I do when I end up cooking my pasta, I end up adding some of the starchy water to the sauce just to make it go a lot farther, because as you can see, it doesn't make a huge quantity, but I would say I add at least 1 cup of the starchy water when I'm finished using it. And then that green powder you saw me add at the end is stinging nettle. It's spring, so it's time to harvest our stinging nettle. So I harvested a bunch from my parents' property and dried it and made a powder because it is stocked full of minerals and vitamins, and it's a great way to sneak extra minerals and vitamins in your kids' food. So if you want a video on me doing that, I can do that for you guys. It's pretty simple, and you can't even taste it when you add this quantity. So I just added those in my glass jars to get ready to freeze when I bring them to my mom's house. And now we are on to the next thing, and I just want to mention it now too before it's too late. As always, all the recipes will be either linked down below or written down below and timestamped down below, so if you want to skip around to recipes you are interested in, then feel free. So right now I'm just making oat milk for my next recipe, which is banana pancakes. If you don't already make oat milk from scratch and you're buying it, I would say this is the first thing you should transition to. First of all, if you look at the ingredient list of oat milk, it has a lot of weird ingredients, and the second ingredient on the list is actually a seed oil, vegetable oil. And not only because of that, but it's also so easy to make and so cheap. It's like a fraction of the price, and as you can see here, it literally takes like a minute to make. All you're gonna want to do is blend roughly 3/4 cups of rolled oats to 4 cups of water just for 30 seconds to a minute, and then strain it. And the trick to making it not goopy, your oat milk, is when you strain it to just let it strain through and don't really squeeze it. You can even strain it twice if you want, but I'm not that picky because I use this up in a couple of days. I just find the longer it sits, sometimes the gooey, not the gooier, but it separates more. So that's why I like to make small batches. And then what I do with the leftover oats, instead of just wasting it, I save it. I put it in jars in my freezer, and then when I have a large enough quantity, I make oatmeal cookies with it, which again will save you so much money because you're not throwing out the oats and it's way less wasteful. So that's a hack for you if you are already making your oat milk and just throwing out the pulp, because it's still nutritious and it can still be used. And before we move on to the next recipe, I also just wanted to mention something important. I've been doing a little bit of research on things like glyphosate and foods with high levels of pesticides, and I recently just realized that oats is one of them. So before, when we'd go to Walmart, I just buy the normal brand, but when you go to Costco, the organic oats aren't actually that much more expensive, and they're also sprouted. So oats is one of those things high in glyphosate, sprayed with high levels of glyphosate. So if you can afford it, it's one of the top foods I'd probably recommend to source organically. Okay, now we are on to the pancakes. This is something that a lot of the times I kind of just eyeball. I'm pretty good with the consistency of pancakes, but I try to kind of measure out some measurements for you guys. Today I'm using whole wheat flour, but a lot in the past I also use oat flour that I make. I just wanted to use whole wheat flour today because we do have that big bag full and I want to use it up, because we have not been making bread lately, so we have not been using it as much. So feel free to replace the whole wheat flour for oat flour if you are gluten-free. Started off by first making my chia seed eggs. If you want to, you can just use 2 normal eggs, but I like the chia seeds because it adds extra fiber and it is cheaper than a normal egg. So for the chia seed egg, I added 2 tablespoons of chia seeds. How many times can I say chia seeds? Apparently a lot. And then I just submerged it in water, roughly 1/4 cup of water. And then you're just going to want to mix it around with a fork, because this helps all the seeds become coated in water, and leave it for roughly 5 minutes, and then it will become this gelatinous consistency and will act similar to an egg. And then I mashed my bananas in a bowl. I used 3, but you can use as many as you want. If you want it more sweet and you like the taste of bananas, you can add more. If you don't really like bananas, don't even add them then, but the bananas does act as a natural sweetener, so if you opt out for the bananas, you're going to want to use some other sweetener, whether that be sugar or maple syrup. And then I added the wet ingredients all together. So with the bananas, I added a splash of vanilla, along with 1/4 cup of coconut oil. You can use any oil that you prefer, and roughly 1 1/4 cup of oat milk. Again, it's one of those things where I kind of eyeball it to see if I need more or less, depending on how thick you want your pancakes. And then I added my chia seed egg in there. And then for the dry ingredients, I just added 2.5 cups of whole wheat flour and then 2 tablespoons of baking powder. This is just going to help them be fluffy. And then I mix it all together. And then I cook them. And on my cooking pan, I just use a little bit of coconut oil because babies need all the extra fat they can. So don't shy away from oils and fat. It is good for them. And just flip them once the pancake becomes bubbly. And these pancakes is another recipe that freeze well. My trick to freezing them is if you have space, I freeze them on a small baking sheet that fits in my freezer. That way, when they become frozen, you can then stack them all together and put them either in a bag or a glass Tupperware if you have one. And this prevents them from sticking together versus if you froze them first in the glass Tupperware or the bag, they all stick together. So if you're just pulling one out for you or your baby, you can't really do that. You have to let them all defrost at once, and usually when you let something defrost, it's not good to refreeze it. Next, I was just prepping some ingredients for the rest of the recipes I have in this video. Right here, I was just peeling and dicing some sweet potatoes. You all know I love to make this version of black bean brownies. I love them. They taste so good, and you cannot tell they're healthy. They're full of fiber and protein. When I was on Pinterest the other day, I saw a version of sweet potato brownies. It didn't really have a recipe. It just showed that you can make brownies out of sweet potatoes, peanut butter, and maple syrup, but I took a different spin on it and basically followed my black bean brownie recipe, but swapped out the black beans with the sweet potato. So I was just cubing those up and cooking them at 425 for roughly 30 minutes until I could stab a fork through them and they were nice and soft. And while the sweet potato was cooking, I put my chickpeas in a pot to cook those as well. For chickpea chicken nuggets, I was making, along with this chickpea ice cream I just made, which is a huge hit with everyone. It is delicious. I didn't share the full recipe on this video, but if you're interested, I'll leave the link to it down below. So while I had the chickpeas cooking and the sweet potato in the oven, I then moved on to washing, peeling, and grating some carrots, as well as blending some oats for some oat flour. The carrots I was going to use in this DIY homemade chickpea chicken nugget recipe I created. I'll share the recipe down below, but I am definitely still working on it. And then the oat flour was for this recipe, as well as what I mentioned earlier. I was making a sweet potato brownie recipe, kind of following the black bean brownie recipe. And I wasn't sure if I was going to add the oat flour or not because the black bean recipe uses it. However, the picture I told you that I saw on Pinterest just had those 3 ingredients. So I decided to test it without the flour. But next time, I definitely think I am going to add the flour just because I found when they cooked, like when they blended, they seemed like a similar consistency as the black bean brownie. But when I cooked them, they just came out kind of a little bit too gooey. They tasted amazing, but they were hard to kind of cut without falling apart. So I would add the flour to make it thicker. And I want to mention, if you see my tripod jiggling at all in this video, it's because we got a new kitten about a month ago, and it is very playful. And it likes to attack my tripod when I'm filming, so that's why it jolts sometimes. And for the oat flour, I shared this on here a couple times, but all you literally have to do is blend rolled oats. It's the easiest recipe ever. Just add as many oats as you want the quantity of flour. Of course, when you blend it, it makes a little bit less, but I always make a little bit extra and then just store the rest for later because I use oat flour pretty frequently, at least once a week in some sort of recipe. I just substitute it a lot for regular flour. And also, this is your sign, if you are buying oat flour from the store, do not do that. It's so overpriced. The only reason you might have to do that is if you don't have a blender, but I recommend investing in a blender because it is multi-purposeful. I use it for everything. We used to have a food processor that we got for free, but Kai broke it because he tried to make pizza dough in it. Okay, so now let's talk about these brownies. So like I said, I didn't really follow an exact recipe. I kind of just made them similar to the black bean brownies, but not the exact same. I'm going to put a tailored version of these sweet potato brownies down below that will turn out a little bit better. So I would, if I was you, add 2 large sweet potatoes, half a cup of cacao powder or cocoa powder, 1 cup of oat flour, a dash of salt, half a cup of maple syrup or honey or whatever sweetener you want that is affordable to you, half a cup of coconut oil. You can see in this video I added 1 cup, but that was, I think, way too much. You only need half a cup, and 2 teaspoons of baking soda. Blend it all together. If you want, you can add chocolate chips once it's blended. Put it in a greased baking sheet, bake it at 350 for 20 minutes roughly. And these turn out gooier than the black bean brownies. So the consistency when it comes out, when it's hot, might seem like it's not cooked all the way, but you just have to let them cool off fully. You can even put them in the fridge and they will harden up. Since I already had the oven on for the brownies, I decided to take advantage of it, and I just poured this little package of breadcrumbs I had left over on a baking sheet and put it in the oven just to toast it up for a bit for my chickpea chicken nuggets. This is not necessary. You can totally skip this step. It just adds a little bit of more crispier flavor to the nuggets, but again, totally not necessary. And I did not leave these in here the whole time the brownies were cooking. I just added them the last couple minutes. That's all they need to be in there for, is a minute or two. And then at this point, my chickpeas were done, so I drained them and then brought them over and put them in my blender. I think I added roughly 2 cups of chickpeas for this recipe. Again, this is another one that I'm really working on and kind of just eyeballed. I think they turned out good, but my twin brother said they were a little bit dry. However, he tried one like a couple days after, so they weren't fresh. But I did add, if you want to try this recipe, like I said, roughly 2 cups of chickpeas. I would say 1/3 to half a cup of shredded carrots, just to add some more veggies in there for Makai. Then for spices, I try to keep it simple, and I just added a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, nutritional yeast. We love that spice in our house. It gives like a cheesy flavor. Some garlic and some onion powder, but you could add anything that you really like the flavor of: oregano, basil, you like spicy chili. And then to give it more liquid so they can stick together, I decided to add tahini because I add this in everything. Again, I eyeballed it, but I would say I added roughly 3 tablespoons to 1/4 of a cup, and then I added 1/4 of a cup, again roughly, of water, just to get a consistency where you can form them together like a patty. Next time I might add more liquid of some sort, because like I said, my brother did say they were dry. So once it was all blended, I formed it into little patties like the size of chicken nuggets. Then I pressed each side into the breadcrumb mixture, and for the breadcrumb mixture I added the breadcrumbs along with some oat flour, and to give it more flavoring I added a little bit of nutritional yeast. You could add salt and pepper as well if you want, but because these are for my 1.5-year-old, we try not to use too much of it, and since I added a dash in the mixture, I didn't want to add it into the crumb outside. But if it was for you, you could do this, and again, you can add different spices on the outside as well. So yeah, I made them into little patties, pressed each side into the crumb mixture, and then put it on my baking sheet, and then I put them into the oven at 375 for roughly 20 minutes. And I didn't bother flipping them halfway through, and they turned out fine. They were completely cooked all the way. And the good thing about making chickpea chicken nuggets instead of real chicken nuggets is you don't have to worry about food poisoning or not cooking them all the way through. I mean, I'm sure if you're an avid meat eater, you know how long to cook chicken for, but that's the good thing about these. Like, you're not going to do any harm by not cooking them too long. But I did find 20 minutes allowed them to be crispy but not too cooked. As you can see here, I think they turned out pretty good, and I thought they tasted good. They are nice in some sort of dipping sauce. You can see I did use some plastic and some plastic Tupperwares. We eventually do want to switch to all glass and metal containers and no plastic, but it is a progress. I get a lot of comments on here saying, oh, the things you're using aren't good. You use plastic cutting boards, or your knives aren't sharp, or this and that. And our goal is to be zero plastic, but it happens over time because we just can't buy all new glass Tupperware at once because that is expensive. We have a lot of mason jars that we recycled or got from friends and family. So things like soup that fit in a mason jar, we have plenty of glass storage for that. But for things that are flat, like these pancakes, we don't have many glass Tupperware. We only have one, and Kai actually just burnt the lid on it because he put it on the hot stove. And then we have small metal ones, but we have these little plastic containers that my dad got for free at the school because they throw them out, so he just takes them. So not ideal, but not the worst. Okay, this is a long-winded way to say, I know you guys are going to point out that I try to not really use a lot of plastic, but I'm using plastic here. I'm not perfect. It's a slow switch. Okay, now on this next recipe, this is another tried and true recipe that my son loves. He will definitely eat this every single time. He'll eat bowls and bowls of this. This is probably one of his favorite meals, along with my lentil curry that I make. And the great thing about this meal is it's packed full of protein and fiber and lots of micronutrients. Split peas, if you don't know, are a great source of protein if you're vegetarian, and then also a great source of fiber along with all these other things in there. So this is another recipe. I feel like I say this for all my recipes, but it's really customizable. Today I'm chopping up 2 carrots along with an onion and garlic. I always use onion and garlic in everything I make. Usually I add celery stalks, but when I got to the checkout, when I went to buy my ingredients this week, I realized the celery I chose was going brown. So I ended up just leaving it behind and not adding it, but that adds a lovely flavor to it. But really, you don't have to add the carrots or the celery stalk. You can literally just do it with the onions and garlics and split peas. And then for the spices, I always add a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I'm going to say the same thing again as I said for previous recipes. You can really just add the spices that you like in soups. For mine, I added garlic powder and onion powder. Those are my tried and true spices that I add almost in everything. I added a little splash of parsley, a little bit of oregano. And what really gives this the flavor is adding vegetable broth instead of water. And honestly, with that, you really don't have to add spices. The vegetable broth has such a lovely flavor. And I actually just last week for my last video posted a recipe on how I make my vegetable stock for essentially free using veggie scraps. So it's zero waste and it's cost effective and can last you a long time. And it gives flavor to so many dishes. I add this to things all the time. I add a little bit of veggie stock to a lot of things I cook because it just gives it another level of flavor. So once you have everything chopped and ready to go, you're going to want to saute your onion for roughly 5 or 6 minutes until it turns golden brown. Sometimes I saute it with water or the veggie broth, sometimes with oil. So you can choose what you want to use. If you're trying to be more frugal, you can just saute things in water. You don't have to use oil. And then once it's brown, I add the garlic, and you're only going to want to saute that for roughly a minute and turn the heat down for this because garlic can burn really easily. And then after these 2 things are sauteed, you can just go ahead and add everything else in, your spices, your veggies, your split peas. For the split peas, I added roughly 3 cups for this, and for water, I added 4 cups of veggie broth and 1 cup of regular water just to have more liquid. And for your split peas, before you add them, I would recommend rinsing them if you have a fine mesh strainer, just to get any of the dirt and debris out of it. And when you rinse them, you'll see how dirty things like split peas and lentils, chickpeas are. You should always rinse them. Sometimes I forget, but I try to make a habit of it. And then I bring the whole pot to a boil and then let it simmer for roughly 30 or 40 minutes until the split peas are nice and soft. So this is a really easy meal to make, and it's easy to make when you have kids around because you just have to chop all your ingredients up, throw it in a pot, and then just let it do its thing. And the last step is completely optional depending on how you like the consistency of your soups. But I choose to blend it with an immersion blender. I just like this because if there's, accidentally I didn't cut the carrots good enough, there's no choking hazards for my son because he still is 1.5 years. And not only that, he just likes the consistency more when it is blended. But if you like your soups more chunky and less baby food like, you can just skip this step. But I personally like it this way too. I do not mind my food being baby like, I guess. But if you do choose to blend it, make sure you take out your bay leaves beforehand. But if you don't blend it, you can leave them in there, because over time, if you let the soup sit, it will give more flavor to it. Or you can just take them out right away, depending if you're going to freeze it right away. And another reason I like soups is because they're very easy to freeze, and they're great to freeze in individual portions like this. I think I ended up filling roughly 9 small mason jars, and each one will be a portion for Makai. So I brought them all to my mom's. So then he'll have basically 9 meals there, ready to go whenever he needs it, whether it's for lunch or dinner, because he could eat it for both. And I just labeled them all with what it is and the date it was made, so she knows and doesn't get it mixed up with the basil pesto, which you'll see me here soon labeling everything. And then for one of the last recipes, I'm making yet another fruit leather. I made this in one of my last videos, but I made it with some rhubarb I had frozen. But this time I'm making it with some plums that I had frozen from our yard last year. Again, I also have bags of this in my sister's freezer. So I really am trying to use them all up before plum season and rhubarb season comes again. Because actually our rhubarb is almost ready to be picked soon. So I can restock the freezer with fresh stuff. And I've been using this dehydrator, I kid you not, almost every day since getting it, because we are in spring and things are becoming ready to harvest and forage for. So far I've used it for dandelions, lots of lemon balm, stinging nettle, and lots of frozen fruit that I have to use for my sister's freezer. And this is great too, because it's a great way to preserve fruits and herbs without them going bad, and it lasts a long time. So I cut this plum fruit leather up, and then I just brought it to my mom's house, and it'll last there for a while. And Makai loves this for a sweet treat. We don't give it to him all the time, but it is healthy, because literally the only thing in this is just plums blended and then dried. No weird ingredients that you can't pronounce, no preservatives, no artificial sweeteners or a bunch of extra sugar, literally just plums blended up. If you're interested in this dehydrator, I 100% recommend it. Like I said, I've been using it every day for 2 or 3 weeks now since I got it. I'll link it down below if you're interested. It's by London Shine, and it is literally amazing. I had a food dehydrator before this. It was actually my dad's, not mine, and it was a plastic one, and it was, I mean, to be fair, it was a little bit old, but it took double the amount of time for things to dehydrate it versus this one's metal, and you can see it's very heavy duty. And if you want, you can use the code Jill10 to save 10% off your dehydrator. And then for the last thing I made was this little frozen treat to bring to my mom's, for a treat for my mom, and then a little healthy treat for Makai whenever the weather gets hotter, because it is finally spring and almost summer. The snow just melted roughly 2 or 3 weeks ago here, and the sun is out. I am so beyond thankful. But I didn't show the whole recipe here, but I'll link it down below. This ice cream, in quotation marks, is made out of chickpeas, dates, and peanut butter. All you have to do is blend it all together, put it in either popsicle trays or ice cube trays, freeze them, and then when you pop them out, this is totally optional, but you can top them with chocolate and coconut flakes, maybe a little bit of sea salt, or just leave them as is, and they are so delicious. My mom loved them. Makai had one and he loved it too. Again, this is not an everyday thing, but everyone, no matter your age, deserves a little treat here and there, and it's all pure and good and healthy ingredients. So I do not feel bad about giving him these. And then right here at the end, this is on a different day. I already brought some of the stuff to my mom's house, like the pancakes and the brownies, but I didn't bring most of the things that had to be refrigerated. So I was just making some labels. I wouldn't do this for our own freezer, but because it was at my mom's, I wanted her to know what everything was and the date it was made, just in case, the split pea soup might be there for months and months, because he goes to my mom's house, usually, not always, every Friday for either a couple hours or the full day, which I am so thankful for. A lot of you guys ask, how am I able to do all that I do while doing these videos? And that's the secret. My mom, she helps. I cannot do this without that one day, because I can film everything during his nap usually. Like usually I'll do like one recipe a day, or if my mom has him, I'll do everything in one day and then do the editing while he naps. I honestly don't know how some other people do it on YouTube that homeschool, have like 5 kids, make everything from scratch and upload 1 to 2 videos a week, because I struggle to get the one video out with 1 day of help and only a baby that still naps. So there's just some super moms out there, and I am not at that level yet. But anyway, I'm gonna leave you guys off with that, and thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it when you take the time to watch and comment. I learned so much stuff from you guys in the comments, and I just want to say how much I appreciate it. Have a great day.